Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the U.S. horizon, watching the stars drift past the main view screen. The ship had been traveling through the Kepler 442 system for 3 days now, scanning planets and taking readings. It was routine work, the kind that made up most of space exploration. Find new worlds, check if they had useful resources, and move on to the next system. Jake had been doing this job for 15 years. He knew every sound his ship made, every vibration in the deck plates. The horizon was getting old, but she was reliable. His crew of 43 men and women trusted him to bring them home safe. So far, he had never let them down. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange," said Dr. Lisa Park from her science station. She was young for a chief science officer. Only 32, but she was the smartest person Jake had ever met. "There are energy readings coming from the edge of the system." Jake walked over to look at her screen. Numbers and graphs meant nothing to him, but Lisa's worried expression told him everything. "What kind of energy?" "I don't know. It's not natural. Someone is out there." Commander Alex Stone looked up from his tactical station. Alex was Jake's oldest friend and the ship's military officer. He had gray hair and scars from the colony wars. 20 years ago. "Could be pirates," Alex said. "This system is pretty far from Earth." Jake shook his head. "Pirates don't have energy signatures like that." "Lisa, how big are we talking?" Lisa checked her instruments again. "Big, Captain, really big. Multiple contacts, all larger than anything in our fleet." The bridge went quiet. Everyone knew what that meant. In 300 years of space travel, humans had never met another intelligent species. They had found planets with simple life, even some with complex animals, but nothing that could build spaceships. "Red alert," Jake ordered. The bridge lights dimmed and red warning lights began flashing. "Alex, bring weapons online." "Lisa, keep scanning. I want to know everything about them." "Contact in 5 minutes," reported the helmsman, a young man named Danny Rodriguez. His hands were steady on the controls, but Jake could see the tension in his shoulders. "Captain," Lisa said, her voice excited despite the danger. "They're slowing down. I think they want to meet us." Jake felt his stomach twist. First contact with an alien species. This was the moment every space explorer dreamed about. It was also the moment every military officer had nightmares about. On screen, he ordered. The view screen changed from stars to show space in front of them. At first, Jake saw nothing. Then shapes began to appear as they dropped out of faster than light. Travel, ships, but unlike anything humans had ever built. They were smooth and curved, like living things made of metal. The smallest one was twice the size of the horizon. 12 ships, Alex reported. "They're surrounding us." "Captain, we're receiving a transmission," said Sarah Kim, the communications officer. "It's in English." Jake blinked. "English? How do they know English?" "I don't know, sir." "Should I put it through?" Jake looked around his bridge. His crew was scared but ready. These were good people who had followed him across the galaxy. Whatever happened next, he would not let them down. "Put it through." The view screen changed again. Now it showed a face that was almost human, but not quite. The skin was pale blue, the eyes were too large, and there were no visible ears. When it spoke, the voice was calm and confident. "Human vessel, I am High Coordinator Veltar of the Confederation. You will prepare to be boarded for diplomatic negotiations." Jake stepped forward. "This is Captain Morrison of the United Earth ship Horizon. We come in peace, but we don't allow boarding of our vessel." The alien's large eyes seemed to study him. "You misunderstand your situation, Captain Morrison. This is not a request. Your species has entered Confederation space without permission. You must now accept our authority." "We didn't know this was anyone's space," Jake replied. "We're explorers, not invaders. We can leave if you want." Leaving is no longer an option. Your species has been observed for some time. You expand too quickly and build too many weapons. You must be controlled before you become a threat to galactic peace. Alex moved closer to Jake. Captain, they've powered up weapons. All 12 ships. Jake kept his voice steady. Coordinator Velter, we don't want any trouble. But we won't be controlled by anyone. The alien made a sound that might have been laughter. You have no choice. Your primitive vessel cannot escape our fleet. You will surrender now, or we will take your ship by force. Jake looked at his crew. Lisa was staring at the screen with a mix of wonder and horror. Alex had his hand on his weapon controls. Sarah and Danny were watching him, waiting for orders. These aliens thought humans were primitive. They thought they could just take what they wanted. Jake had met bullies before, in the colony wars, and in the corporate conflicts that followed. The answer was always the same. Alex, he said quietly, prepare for emergency jump. Full power to the engines. Sir, a jump from here could damage the ship, Alex warned. Better damaged than captured. Jake looked back at the screen. Coordinator Velter, here's our answer. We don't surrender to anyone. The alien's expression changed. For the first time, it looked surprised. You would risk death rather than accept proper guidance. We would risk death rather than give up our freedom. Jake turned to Alex. Execute emergency jump. Now. The ship shook violently as the engines overloaded. Sparks flew from control panels, and the lights flickered. On the screen, Jake saw the alien ships moving to intercept them, but they were too slow. Jump successful, Danny reported. We're clear of their fleet. Jake sat down in his captain's chair. His hands were shaking, but his voice was steady. Set course for Earth. Maximum speed. Yes, sir, Danny replied, as the horizon raced toward home. Jake thought about what had just happened. Humanity had just met their first alien species, and it had gone very badly. The Zephyrians wanted to control them, to tell them where they could go and what they could do. That was not going to happen. Lisa, he said, start preparing a full report. Everything we learned about their ships, their weapons, their technology. Yes, Captain. Alex, I want tactical analysis. How do we fight ships like that? Alex nodded grimly. Already working on it. Jake stared at the stars rushing past. The Zephyrians thought humans were primitive and weak. They thought they could just take what they wanted. They were about to learn that they had made a very big mistake. Humanity had never backed down from a fight. And they were not about to start now. The news reached Earth faster than the horizon could travel. Captain Morrison had sent an emergency message through the quantum communication network, and within hours every human settlement in the galaxy knew about the aliens. President Maria Gonzalez sat in the emergency meeting room deep beneath the Capitol building. Around the table were the most powerful people in human space. Fleet Admiral Ben Carter, Ambassador Shachales, Right General Kate Sullivan, and a dozen others. The room was tense and quiet. Let me make sure I understand this, President Gonzalez said, reading from the report on her tablet. These aliens, the Zephyrians, want us to give up our weapons, move our colonies, and become their subjects. Admiral Carter nodded. He was a big man with gray hair and cold blue eyes. That's correct, Madam President. They claim it's for our own good, but it sounds like conquest to me. Ambassador Wright leaned forward. He was younger than the others, with the smooth manner of a career diplomat. Perhaps we're being too hasty. These beings have been in space far longer than us. Maybe they really do want to help us into slavery, General Sullivan said sharply. She commanded the Colonial Defense Forces and had fought pirates and rebels across human space. I've seen this before. Someone shows up with superior firepower and offers to protect you. It never ends well. Dr. Park appeared on the wall screen, transmitting from the horizon still racing toward Earth. I believe we should try to negotiate, she said. This is first contact with an alien civilization. We can't let it end in war. Admiral Carter shook his head. Dr. Park, with respect, they didn't come to negotiate. They came to give orders. There's a difference. President Gonzalez stood up and walked to the window. Even underground, she could see the lights of the city above through the reinforced glass. 30 billion humans lived on Earth, with another 50 billion spread across 200 colonies. All of them were now in danger. What are our military options? She asked Admiral. Carter activated a holographic display showing human space. Red dots marked military bases and fleet positions. We have 600 active warships, plus maybe 2,000 more in the reserves. The problem is, they're spread out across the entire galaxy. The aliens could hit us anywhere. How do their ships compare to ours? General Sullivan asked. We don't know yet, Carter admitted. The horizon only saw them for a few minutes. But they're bigger than anything we have, and their energy readings suggest advanced technology. Ambassador Wright cleared his throat. If I may, we should consider that they might be testing us. Many alien civilizations in science fiction stories do this. They present a harsh ultimatum to see how a species reacts. This isn't science fiction, General Sullivan snapped. This is real life, and real aliens just threatened our entire species. Dr. Park's voice came from the screen again. But think about what we could learn from them. Medicine, technology, science. If we can find a peaceful solution, humanity could advance by centuries. President Gonzalez turned back to the table. And if we can't find a peaceful solution, the room went quiet. Everyone knew the answer, but no one wanted to say it. Admiral Carter finally spoke. Then we fight. We've never backed down from a bully before. These aren't human bullies, Ambassador Wright protested. These are advanced aliens with superior technology. So were the British when the colonies rebelled, General Sullivan said. Technology doesn't always win wars. Sometimes courage and determination matter more. President Gonzalez sat back down. Admiral Carter, I want you to begin military preparations immediately, quietly. Call it training exercises if anyone asks. Yes, Madam President. General Sullivan, work with colonial governments. Make sure they know what's happening and what their options are. Understood. Ambassador Wright, prepare for the possibility of negotiations. If they want to talk, we'll listen. But we go in from a position of strength, not weakness. Wright nodded reluctantly. What if they refuse to negotiate on equal terms? Then we'll deal with that when it happens. 3 days later, Commander Alex Stone sat in the briefing room of the military intelligence base on Luna. His mission had been classified at the highest levels. Only a few dozen people in all of human space knew what he was about to attempt. This is completely insane, said Sarah Kim, studying the plans on her tablet. She had volunteered for the mission when she learned about it. We're going to steal an alien ship, not steal, Alex corrected. Borrow. We need to understand their technology if we're going to fight them. The third member of their team was Danny Rodriguez, who had also volunteered after the Horizon returned to Earth. He was the best pilot in the fleet, young enough to be reckless and skilled enough to survive it. How do we even know where to find them? Danny asked. Alex activated the holographic display. It showed a star system near the edge of human space. Intelligence reports suggest they have an outpost here. It's isolated, lightly defended. If we're going to try this anywhere, it's there. Sarah looked at the display. And if we're wrong, if it's not lightly defended, then we run away very fast. Their ship was the UES Shadow, a prototype stealth vessel that could avoid most sensors. It was small, fast, and equipped with the latest cloaking technology. If everything went right, they could get in and out without being detected. If everything went wrong, they would probably die. The mission took 2 weeks. They jumped from system to system, using gas giants and asteroid fields to hide their approach. When they finally reached the target system, they found exactly what intelligence had predicted: a small alien outpost orbiting a dead planet. 2 ships, Danny reported, keeping his voice low even though they were still millions of kilometers away. Both smaller than what the horizon encountered. Alex studied the sensor readings. Patrol vessels, probably. Sarah, any communication, traffic? Very little. I think most of the aliens are on the station, not the ships. They waited for 6 hours, watching and learning. The alien ships followed predictable patrol patterns. Every 4 hours, one would dock at the station while the other continued its rounds. During the transition, there was a 10-minute window when both ships were close to the station. That's our chance, Alex said. Danny, can you get us close to the ship that's docking? Maybe. The stealth system should hide us, but if they have sensors we don't know about, ... then we improvise. The approach took 3 hours of careful maneuvering. Danny piloted the shadow through the debris field around the planet, using chunks of rock and metal to mask their approach. Sarah monitored alien communications, ready to warn them if they were detected. They weren't. The alien ship was beautiful, in a way that human vessels were not. Where human ships were built for function, this one seemed to have been grown rather than constructed. Its hull was smooth and seamless, colored a deep blue that seemed to shift in the light. Docking in 30 seconds, Danny whispered. Alex checked his equipment one more time. He would have to board the alien ship, download whatever data he could, find, and get back to the shadow before the aliens noticed. Simple in theory, terrifying in practice. The shadow touched the alien hull with barely a sound. Alex activated the cutting tool and burned through the outer skin of the ship. Inside, everything was different. The corridors were too wide, the lighting was wrong, and the air smelled strange. But the computer systems were not so different. Whoever had built this ship used the same basic principles as human technology. Information was stored in data cores, just like human ships. Alex found the main computer and plugged in his portable storage device. Data began flowing. Ship specifications, weapon capabilities, fleet movements, and most importantly, communications with the Zephyrian leadership. What he read made his blood run cold. The Zephyrians had been watching humanity for decades. They knew about every human colony, every military base, every weakness in human defenses. They had detailed plans for taking control of human space, starting with the largest population centers. But there was something else in the data that surprised him. The Zephyrians were afraid, not of human military power, but of human unpredictability. Their reports described humans as irrationally aggressive and unwilling to accept proper authority. They were worried that humanity would inspire other species to rebel against Zephyrian control. Alex, you need to get back here now. Sarah's voice came through his communicator. The other ship is returning early. Alex grabbed his equipment and ran. Behind him, alarms began sounding as the aliens discovered the breach in their hull. He made it to the shadow just as laser bolts began hitting the hull around them. Go, 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 he shouted. Denny pushed the engines to maximum power. The shadow shot away from the alien ship like a bullet, racing for the edge of the system. Behind them, both alien vessels gave chase, but the human ship was faster and harder to track. They escaped, but barely. On the long journey back to Earth, Alex studied the stolen data. The more he learned, the more worried he became. The Zephyrians were not just another alien species. They were the rulers of this entire region of the galaxy, with dozens of subject races under their control. Humanity was about to fight an empire that had existed for thousands of years, but the data also revealed something important. The Zephyrians had never faced an enemy like humanity before. Every species they had conquered had eventually submitted to their authority. They literally did not understand what to do with people who refused to give up. Alex smiled grimly. as he prepared his report. The aliens wanted to control humanity because they thought humans were dangerous. They were about to find out just how right they were. The 30-day deadline was almost over. President Gonzalez stood before the cameras in the Presidential Broadcasting Center, knowing that her words would reach every human settlement in the galaxy. Behind her, the flags of Earth and the Colonial Alliance hung side by side. "My fellow humans," she began, her voice steady and strong. "3 weeks ago, we learned that we are not alone in the universe. We also learned that some beings believe they have the right to control us, to tell us where we can live and how we must behave." She paused, looking directly into the camera. "I am here to tell you that no one has that right. Not over us, not over any free people. Today, I activate the Terran Defense Protocol. Every colony, every settlement, every human in space is hereby called upon to defend our freedom." The response was immediate. From the mining colonies in the Outer Rim to the research stations near the galactic core, humans began preparing for war. Old conflicts were forgotten as former enemies united against the alien threat. Dr. Lisa Park sat in the diplomatic shuttle, U.S. Olive Branch, watching the stars drift past. She had convinced President Gonzalez to let her try one last time to make peace with the Zep. Ambassador Wright sat across from her, reviewing his notes for the millionth time. "You know this won't work," said Lieutenant Amy Forster, the shuttle's security chief. She was young but experienced, with the quiet confidence of someone who had seen combat. "They've already made up their minds. We have to try," Lisa insisted. "War should always be the last option, not the first." Ambassador Wright nodded. "Even if we can't prevent war, we might learn something useful about their intentions." The meeting point was a space station in neutral territory, far from any human or Zephyrian world. The station was ancient, built by a species that had vanished long before either humans or Zephyrians had reached space. Now it served as a place where different species could meet safely. The Zephyrian delegation was already waiting. When the Olive Branch arrived, High Coordinator Veltar stood in the center of the meeting chamber, surrounded by 6 other aliens. They all looked similar to him: tall, pale blue skin, large eyes, and an air of absolute confidence. "Dr. Park," Veltar said as she entered the chamber, "I am surprised that your species sent a scientist to these proceedings." "I study life," Lisa replied. "I believe all life has value, including yours." Veltar made that sound that might have been laughter. "How refreshing. Your military leaders were not so philosophical." Ambassador Wright stepped forward. "Coordinator Veltar, we come seeking a peaceful solution to our differences. Surely there must be some way our species can coexist." "There is," Veltar replied immediately. "Accept our authority. Move your colonies to the designated preservation zones. Surrender your military vessels. Simple." "And if we refuse," Lisa asked, "then you will be removed by force. Your colonies will be evacuated, your ships destroyed, your people relocated. It will be unpleasant, but necessary for galactic stability." Wright consulted his notes. "Perhaps we could discuss a gradual transition, some form of autonomous status, within your confederation." "Impossible. Your species is too aggressive, too unpredictable. You must be controlled completely, or you will be a danger to everyone." Lisa felt her heart sink. The aliens weren't here to negotiate. They were here to deliver an ultimatum. "What about trade?" she tried. "Cultural exchange? Surely there are benefits to cooperation rather than conquest." Veltar's large eyes studied her. "You still do not understand. This is not conquest. This is management. The Confederation has maintained galactic peace for 3,000 years by ensuring that dangerous species are properly controlled." "Who decides which species are dangerous?" Amy Foster asked quietly. "Those with the wisdom and experience to make such judgments." Veltar gestured to himself and his companions. The Zephyrian species has ruled this region of space since before your world developed agriculture. We have seen what happens when primitive species are allowed to expand unchecked. Lisa stood up. And what happens to the species you control? Do they have any say in their own fate? They are cared for, protected, guided. They live peaceful, productive lives under our direction. As slaves, Amy said bluntly. Veltar's expression hardened. As children, under the guidance of adults. Your species is barely 300 years old, in space. You are infants playing with weapons you do not understand. Ambassador Wright tried one more time. Coordinator, surely you can see that forcing an unwilling species into submission will only breed resentment and rebellion. It has never happened before. Once a species accepts proper authority, they come to appreciate the benefits of guidance. In time, your people will understand that this is for their own good. Lisa realized that the aliens truly believed what they were saying. They weren't evil, just convinced that they knew what was best for everyone else. It made them even more dangerous. I think we're done here, she said, standing up. Veltar looked surprised. You are leaving? But we have not finished our discussion. Yes. We have. You've made it clear that you have no intention of treating us as equals. You want to be our masters, and we want to be free. There's nothing more to discuss. As they walked back to their shuttle, Wright shook his head. That could have gone better. Actually, it went exactly as I expected, Lisa said. They're not interested in peace. They want submission, and they can't understand why we won't give it to them. The trip back to human space took 4 days. During that time, the first shots of the war were being fired. The Zephyrian attack began at exactly 1200 hours, Galactic Standard Time, on 37 different human worlds, simultaneously. It was coordinated perfectly, showing the kind of military precision that came from thousands of years of experience. The first target was New Pittsburgh, a mining colony with 50,000 inhabitants. Administrator John Hayes was in his office when the alien ships appeared in orbit. He was a tough man who had built the colony from nothing, and he had no intention of giving up without a fight. This is Administrator Hayes to all stations. He broadcast on the emergency frequency. We are under attack by alien forces. All civilian personnel report to emergency shelters. All security personnel report to defensive positions. The miners of New Pittsburgh were not soldiers, but they were not helpless either. They had explosives for clearing rock, heavy equipment for moving ore, and most importantly, they had the kind of stubborn courage that made people leave Earth to build new worlds in dangerous places. When the first Zephyrian landing craft touched down, they found the mining tunnels turned into defensive positions. The aliens had expected to find frightened civilians waiting to be evacuated. Instead, they found armed humans who fought for every meter of ground. The battle lasted 6 hours. The aliens had better weapons and armor, but the humans knew the terrain and were willing to take risks that horrified their enemies. Mining charges became improvised explosives. Excavation equipment became mobile weapons platforms. The underground tunnels became a maze where human defenders could attack and disappear. Captain Morrison and the Horizon arrived just as the aliens were preparing to destroy the colony from orbit. His ship was outnumbered 3-1, but he had spent weeks studying the stolen Zephyrian data. He knew their weaknesses. All ships target their shield generators. He ordered his small fleet concentrate fire on the lead vessel. The Zephyrians had superior energy shields, but they relied on them too heavily. When human kinetic weapons broke through their defenses, the aliens were caught completely off guard. 2 Zephyrian cruisers exploded before they could adjust their tactics. This is Captain Morrison to New Pittsburgh, he broadcast. Cavalry has arrived. Hang tight down there. The space battle lasted another hour. When it was over, 3 Zephyrian ships were destroyed, and the rest were retreating. New Pittsburgh was badly damaged, but its people were free. Administrator Hayes met with Captain Morrison after the battle. Both men were exhausted, covered in dust and smoke from the fighting. They said we would be relocated to a preservation zone, Hayes said, spitting in the dirt. Said it was for our own good. Morrison nodded grimly. They told us the same thing. Apparently they think we need their protection. From what? From ourselves, I guess. They think we're too dangerous to be left alone. Hayes looked around at his battered colony. Buildings were destroyed, equipment was wrecked, and good people were dead. But the flag of New Pittsburgh still flew over the main administrative building. Maybe they're right, he said finally. Maybe. We are too dangerous to be left alone. Morrison clapped him on the shoulder. That's what I'm counting on. Word of the victory at New Pittsburgh spread through human space faster than the speed of light. Other colonies that were under attack took heart from the news. If a mining colony could defeat Zephyrian forces, then any human settlement could do the same. But the aliens learned from their defeats too. High Coordinator Veltar studied the reports from New Pittsburgh with growing concern. The humans had not fought like any species the Confederation had encountered before. They seemed to enjoy combat, to thrive on impossible odds. Sir, one of his subordinates reported, the humans are broadcasting messages to our subject species. They claim that rebellion is possible, that the Confederation can be defeated. Veltar felt something he had not experienced in centuries: doubt. The Confederation's power depended on the belief that resistance was futile. If the humans proved that wrong, the entire galactic order could collapse. Double our military preparations, he ordered, and sent word to the Council. This situation may require extreme measures. The war was just beginning, but already it was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. The humans were not fighting just for survival. They were fighting for something the Zephyrians had never encountered, the idea that freedom was worth any price, even death, and that idea was starting to spread. 6 months into the war, Admiral Ben Carter stood on the bridge of the UES Liberty, watching the battle reports scroll across his screens. The war had spread to dozens of star systems, and both sides were learning hard lessons about their enemies. The Zephyrians had superior technology and larger fleets, but they were discovering that humans fought in ways that made no sense to them, where other species tried to minimize casualties and preserve resources. Humans seemed willing to sacrifice everything for victory. Admiral, we're receiving reports from the Kepler Station battle, reported his communications officer, Lieutenant James Park. He was Dr. Lisa Park's younger brother, and he had volunteered for military service after the diplomatic mission failed. Carter studied the tactical display. Kepler Station was a major human research facility that the aliens had been trying to capture for 2 weeks. The battle there would determine control of an entire sector of space. What's Morrison's status? Carter asked. Captain Morrison is requesting permission to implement the Morrison maneuver, sir. Carter frowned. The Morrison maneuver was a tactic that Jake Morrison had developed during the war. It involved using FTL drives as weapons, creating artificial gravity wells that could tear apart enemy ships. The problem was that most human ships didn't survive the process either. How many ships does he have? 12, sir? Against 30 Zephyrian vessels. The bridge went quiet. Everyone knew those odds were impossible. A rational commander would retreat and try to fight another day, but rationality was not humanity's strong point. Sir, came Morrison's voice over the communicator. I know what you're thinking, but if we let them take Kepler Station, they'll have a clear path to the core worlds. We can't let that happen. Carter closed his eyes. Morrison was right, but that didn't make the decision any easier. He was about to order 12 crews to their deaths. Permission granted, Captain. Give them hell. Will do, sir. See you on the other side. The transmission cut off. Carter watched the tactical display as Morrison's ships moved into attack formation. On the other side of the system, the Fleet was preparing to bombard Kepler Station into submission. What happened next would be remembered as one of the most insane military maneuvers in galactic history. Morrison's ships accelerated directly toward the center of the Zephyrian fleet. At maximum speed, they activated their FTL drives not to escape, but to create gravitational distortions that acted like massive bombs. The first human ship to execute the maneuver, the used Defiance, disappeared in a flash of light that tore 3 Zephyrian cruisers apart. The aliens tried to scatter, but they were too close together. One by one, Morrison's ships sacrificed themselves, each one taking multiple enemy vessels with them. When the battle was over, the entire fleet was destroyed. Morrison's ship, the Horizon, was the only human vessel to survive. It limped away from the battle with massive damage, and half its crew dead or wounded. "This is insane," High Coordinator Veltar said, reviewing the battle reports in his command center. "They destroyed their own ships to deny us victory." "What kind of species does that?" His tactical advisor, a being called Sub-Coordinator XI, studied the data with growing alarm. "Sir, this is not the first time. Human forces have used similar tactics at 7 different battles. They seem to prefer mutual destruction over surrender." Veltar felt a chill run through his body. In 3,000 years of conquest, the Confederation had never faced an enemy like this. Other species fought to survive. Humans fought to win, even if it killed them. "What do our subject species think of these reports?" he asked. Sexai hesitated. "Sir, there have been ... incidents. Some of our controlled populations are asking questions about Confederation authority. The humans have been broadcasting messages, claiming that resistance is possible." This was Veltar's worst fear. The Confederation's power was based on the idea that rebellion was futile. If their subject species started believing they could fight back, the entire empire could collapse. "Double the security forces on all controlled worlds," he ordered, "and prepare the sterilization fleet." "Sir, the sterilization fleet? If we cannot control the humans, we will eliminate them. Better to remove the threat completely than risk losing everything." On Earth, Dr. Lisa Park was working in a new role as Director of Psychological Warfare. It was not a job she had ever wanted, but the war had changed everyone's priorities. Her task was to understand how the Zephyrians thought and find ways to disrupt their plans. "They're afraid," she reported to President Maria Gonzalez during their weekly briefing. The intercepted communications show increasing concern about human unpredictability. President Gonzalez studied the reports on her desk. The war was going better than anyone had expected, but the cost was enormous. Human casualties were in the millions, and entire star systems had been evacuated. "What kind of afraid?" the president asked. "They've built their entire civilization on the idea that they know what's best for everyone. We're proving that wrong, and it's shaking the foundation of their society." "Can we use that?" Lisa nodded. "I think so. If we can get other species to rebel, the Zephyrians will have to fight on multiple fronts. They can't control an entire galaxy if everyone is fighting back." The breakthrough came when Commander Alex Stone, now promoted to Admiral, made contact with a species called the Corvins. They had been under Zephyrian control for 800 years, but human broadcasts had reached their homeworld. "Admiral Stone," came the transmission from the Corvin leader, Zixai. "We have received your messages about resistance. Is it true that humans have defeated Zephyrian fleets?" "It's true," Alex replied. "We've won battles they said were impossible to win." "How?" "The Confederation has superior weapons, larger ships, more resources." Alex smiled grimly. "They do, but they also have something we don't. The belief that some lives are more valuable than others. They fight to preserve their hierarchy. We fight to destroy it." Within a month, the first Corvin rebellion began. It was quickly followed by uprisings among the Thalassians, the Regilians, and a dozen other species. The Confederation, which had maintained peace through overwhelming force, suddenly found itself fighting wars across half the galaxy. The Zephyrians responded with brutal efficiency. Entire rebel worlds were bombarded from orbit. Civilian populations were relocated to prison camps. The rebels were outgunned and outnumbered, but they had learned something from the humans. Sometimes the act of resistance was more important than the chance of victory. High Coordinator Veltar stood before the Confederation Council, the ruling body of 12 species that had dominated the galaxy for millennia. He had never seen them look so worried. "The situation is deteriorating rapidly," he reported. "Human forces continue to employ irrational tactics that result in mutual destruction. Worse, their propaganda has inspired rebellions among 47 subject species." The council leader, an ancient being whose species had been the first to join the Confederation, spoke in a voice like grinding stone. "How many ships have we lost?" "Approximately 30% of our active fleet, sir. The humans seem to prefer tactics that destroy both sides rather than accept defeat, and the rebellion's growing. The rebels lack military strength, but they're tying down resources we need to fight the humans." The council leader was quiet for a long moment. "It appears that our usual methods are insufficient. Activate the cleansing protocol." Veltar felt his blood freeze. The cleansing protocol was the Confederation's ultimate weapon, a fleet of automated ships designed to sterilize entire star systems. It had only been used once before, against a species that had threatened to develop faster than light. "Weapons?" "Sir, the humans still have significant civilian populations. The death toll would be enormous." "That is the point, Coordinator. We cannot control a species that refuses to be controlled. We can, however, eliminate them." But the humans were not waiting to be eliminated. Captain Morrison, promoted to Admiral after his survival at Kepler Station, was leading the largest human offensive of the war. His target was not a Zephyrian military base or supply depot. It was the Confederation's capital world itself. "This is completely insane," said Colonel Kate Sullivan, now serving as Morrison's tactical advisor. "We're talking about attacking the most heavily defended planet in the galaxy with 200 ships." "I know," Morrison replied. "That's why they won't see it coming." The plan was typically human, bold, risky, and based on doing something the enemy would never expect. Instead of trying to defeat the Confederation's defenses, Morrison intended to bypass them entirely. "We're not going to attack the planet," he explained to his fleet commanders. "We're going to attack their communications network. Every order, every coordination, every piece of information the Confederation uses goes through their quantum communication grid." "And if we destroy it?" asked Captain Danny Rodriguez, now commanding his own ship. "Then their empire loses the ability to coordinate. Rebellions will spread faster than they can respond. Their fleets will be isolated and confused. The whole system will collapse." It was the kind of strategy that only humans would attempt. Instead of fighting the enemy's strength, they would attack something the enemy had never thought to defend. The assault on the Confederation capital began at dawn, local time. Morrison's fleet dropped out of FTL space, directly above the planet's communication satellites. Using every trick they had learned during 6 months of war, the battle lasted for hours. When it was over, the Confederation's communication network was in ruins. Across the galaxy, Zephyrian fleets found themselves cut off from their command structure, unable to coordinate their responses to the growing rebellions. On Earth, President Gonzalez received the news with quiet satisfaction. The war was far from over, but for the first time, humanity was winning. "Admiral Carter," she said over the communicator, "prepare for the next phase. It's time to liberate some worlds." Carter smiled. "Yes, Madam President. Which ones?" "All of them." 1 year after first contact, the galaxy was in chaos. What had begun as a simple demand for human submission had become the largest galactic war in recorded history. The Confederation's carefully maintained order was crumbling as species after species declared their independence. President Steve Mitchell, who had taken office after Maria Gonzalez's death in a Zephyrian bombing raid, stood before the Galactic Assembly on the neutral world of Haven. Representatives from 63 different species filled the Great Hall, many of them breathing free air for the first time in centuries. "Friends," Mitchell began, his voice carrying across the chamber, "we are here not to celebrate victory, but to build something better than what came before." In the front row sat the leaders of the rebellion, Admiral Morrison, his face scarred from the final battle at the Confederation capital, Dr. Lisa Park, now serving as humanity's chief diplomat, Admiral Alex Stone, whose intelligence network had made the liberation possible, and dozens of alien leaders who had risked everything to fight for freedom. Behind them sat High Coordinator Veltar, no longer a ruler but a representative of a defeated empire. He looked older, broken by the collapse of everything he had believed in. Next to him were the other surviving members of the Confederation Council, waiting to learn their fate. The old system was based on the idea that some species were naturally superior to others, Mitchell continued. That older civilizations had the right to rule younger ones. That peace could only be maintained through domination. He paused, looking directly at Veltar. "We have proven that system wrong." The war had ended, not with humanity's victory over the Zephyrians, but with the complete collapse of the Confederation itself. As the communication network failed and rebellions spread, the subject species had risen up across the galaxy. Many had never fought a war before, but they had learned from human example that freedom was worth any price. The final battle had taken place not in space, but in the Confederation Council chambers themselves. When Zephyrian security forces tried to activate the cleansing protocol, they discovered that their own subject species had infiltrated their government. The Corvan technician Zixai, working with human intelligence, had sabotaged the sterilization fleet before it could launch. "We did not fight this war to become the new rulers of the galaxy," Mitchell said. "We fought it to prove that no one should rule the galaxy." Admiral Morrison stood up. "The Terran Free Alliance proposes a new galactic order based on 3 principles. No species may dominate another. All beings have the right to determine their own fate, and conflicts will be resolved through cooperation, not conquest." The debate that followed lasted 3 days. Some species wanted revenge against their former oppressors. Others feared that without the Confederation's structure, the galaxy would fall into chaos. The humans found themselves in the strange position of arguing for mercy toward the very beings who had tried to enslave them. "Hatred only breeds more hatred," Dr. Park said during her address to the assembly. "If we want to build a better galaxy, we have to start by being better than our enemies." The Zephyrians themselves were divided. Some, like Veltar, struggled to accept a galaxy where their species was not automatically in charge. Others, particularly the younger generation, embraced the new possibilities that human defiance had opened. "We were taught that our way was the only way," said Subcoordinator Zexai, who had become a leader of the Zephyrian reform movement. "The humans showed us that there were other paths, other possibilities we had never considered." The final vote was close. 41 species in favor of the new order, 17 opposed, and 5 abstaining. It was enough to establish the Galactic Free Alliance, a confederation based on voluntary cooperation rather than forced submission. Admiral Stone became the first director of Alliance Security, tasked with preventing any species from trying to rebuild the old empire. His job was made easier by the fact that most worlds were too busy rebuilding to think about conquest. Dr. Park was named the first ambassador of interspecies relations, working to resolve conflicts between species that had been enemies for centuries. Her first major success was negotiating a peace treaty between the Corvans and the Reg Aliens, who had been fighting each other for 800 years under Confederation rule. The most surprising development came from the Zephyrians themselves. Instead of trying to restore their empire, many of them joined the alliance and became advocates for the new system. Veltar himself, after months of struggle with his own beliefs, became one of the most effective voices for galactic cooperation. "I spent my life believing that order required domination," he said in his first speech to the Alliance Assembly. "The humans taught me that true order comes from justice, not force." Captain Morrison, now Admiral Morrison, was given command of the Alliance Defense Force. His job was to protect member worlds from pirates, raiders, and any species that might try to restart the old ways of conquest. The new order was not perfect. There were conflicts, disagreements, and moments when it seemed like the Alliance might fall apart. But slowly, carefully, the galaxy began to heal. On New Earth, a jointly settled world where humans and 6 other species lived together. Children played games that would have been impossible under the old system. Human kids learned Corvan mathematics, while Thalassian youngsters studied human literature. Zephyrian children who had been taught that they were naturally superior to other species instead learned to see them as equals. President Mitchell visited New Earth 5 years after the wars, and he walked through the mixed neighborhoods, watching humans and aliens work together on projects that benefited everyone. In the Central Plaza, a monument honored the war dead of all species, including the Zephyrians who had died fighting for the old system. "Do you think it will last?" asked Dr. Park, who was accompanying him on the tour. Mitchell watched a group of children playing together, their different shapes and colors creating a pattern that was beautiful in its diversity. "I think it has to. The alternative is too terrible to consider." Admiral Morrison joined them at the monument. He was older now, his hair gray, and his face lined with the weight of command. But his eyes were still clear and determined. "Any regrets?" Mitchell asked him. Morrison considered the question. "About the war? No. We did what we had to do. But I do wonder sometimes what would have happened if they had just left us alone." "They couldn't," Dr. Park said. "Their entire civilization was based on control. They literally couldn't understand a species that refused to be controlled. And now they're learning. We all are." As the sun set over New Earth, the 3 humans stood in comfortable silence. Around them, the sounds of a dozen different species filled the air. Corvan singing, Thalassian laughter, Zephyrian poetry, and human music blending together into something entirely new. The war had been terrible, but it had also been necessary. Humanity had not set out to liberate the galaxy, but when faced with the choice between freedom and slavery, they had chosen to fight. That choice had inspired others to fight as well, and together they had torn down an empire that had seemed eternal. The galaxy was still dangerous. There were worlds where the old ways persisted, species that had not yet joined the Alliance, and constant challenges to the new order. But for the first time in thousands of years, those challenges were being met with cooperation instead of conquest. In the end, that was humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy, not their weapons or their tactics or their stubborn refusal to surrender, but their absolute belief that every being had the right to be free. The Zephyrians had wanted talks. They had offered to negotiate humanity's surrender, to discuss the terms of their subjugation, to manage their transition from independence to servitude. Instead, humanity had given them war, and through that war, they had given the galaxy something it had never known: hope. Years later, when historians studied the Great Liberation War, they would argue about tactics and strategies, about who deserved credit for victory and who bore responsibility for the destruction. But the beings who lived through it knew the simple truth. When faced with a choice between freedom and safety, humanity had chosen freedom, and in making that choice, they had shown the rest of the galaxy that another way was possible. The children, playing in New Earth's plaza would grow up in a universe where no species could claim the right to rule another, where cooperation was stronger than conquest, and where the idea of forced submission had been relegated to history books. It was not a perfect universe, but it was a free one, and that, the humans had always believed, was worth fighting for.